All right, welcome back to another Barrel Proof Baseball podcast. Today, we are joined by Bryan Nolt, the founder of Breckenridge Distillery. Bryan, thanks so much for jumping on here with me today.
Thanks, Tony. Glad to be on.
So tell me a little bit about yourself, kind of how you got started in, whiskey and how you turned your love for, I heard Scotch, into, owning a whiskey distillery.
Uh, yeah, interesting story. I am a practicing physician in Colorado 2003 and was just working my tail off. I'm a radiologist, so we work a lot of hours and don't get a lot of time off these days. And so when that happens and you find yourself with little free time and a little disposable income, your hobbies get kind of weird. And so my weird hobby was whiskey. It was, what I could make time for at any time. And I love Scotch. It was, for me, mostly about the Scotch. So I was a collector and had this crazy whiskey club. And, the guys would get together maybe 4 or 5 times a year, and it just kept getting more and more like super awesome. And so you guys would come and they would only bring bottles that you couldn't get at a store. So it became a competition, to go over to Scotland and find rare bottlings and stuff like that. So there were times when I brought $12,000 bottles, to this, and we would drink them.
I think it's pretty cool. I heard that I was listening to a podcast that you were on. I heard you mention a $12,000 bottle. I think it's cool because I think it's gotten to that point where people want to collect all these bottles, but they just sit there and collect dust. Like, aren't they supposed to be drank?
It's never been a problem for me, man. I've just definitely burned through my whiskey collection these days. So that was kind of it. I was going through life and doing my thing, and that's just what I had planned to keep doing. One day I had just come back from Scotland, and a buddy of mine wanted to go fly fishing, and we met up here in Breckenridge, and we fished up Mohawk Lakes just below the Continental Divide. And it was this epic day, incredible day of catching trout. And my buddy, we're standing in the water, our waders, and my buddy was complaining the whole day about medicine. He's an ER doc in Vail, or he was, and I was just on cloud nine talking about whiskey. And as I stood in the water, this light went off, and I just thought, man, I wonder, could I just make the kind of whiskey I want up here with this crazy water? And so I looked into it and figured out it was worth a shot. This was 2007, so there weren't really any craft distilleries out there. There wasn't a proven business model. So I had to dig in and learn what I could. And what I figured was I could probably cash flow it out of Breckenridge with this tiny little distillery, hire some guys that were, really good at what they did. And so I went through a bunch of courses and learned from these guys and kicked it off, and I thought I would have a few days off a month, and on weekends I could come up and make whiskey with these guys and revel in it, and then we just started winning every award out there. So, we scaled up and up and up and up. And, now the company is large. We have 125 employees and, a lot of infrastructure here. There's been millions of dollars in CapEx to, put in gigantic stills over the years. And we're just rolling now, man. It's really cool, but not what I had expected.
It seems like the popularity of it is just kind of blown up. I mean, you're in 49 states.
Yeah. Everyone but West Virginia. West Virginia is one of the control states where the government runs everything. And they're just kind of they're a challenge to get started on. And so I usually just wait till they come and ask me. They get too many requests and they finally say, fine, we'll bring it in. And they call us up and we're like, okay, cool, we'll do it.
That's awesome. So then you start winning some awards. Popularity keeps going up. I mean, I have to imagine Breckenridge is a fairly unique place to be, making whiskey and all the other spirits that you guys make there.
Yeah, it is. So we're a ski town. The resort's owned by Vail Resorts. Breckenridge and Vail Mountain compete year to year for the most visited ski resort in North America, I think. So. We're a small town of 7,000 people, but there's hundreds of thousands of people here on any given day because it's such a popular spot, winter and summer. Where the most unique thing about this place is the elevation. Where the low point here is like 9,600 feet, and we have lift serve terrain up to 13,000. So the elevation is crazy, but it's nice because we're just below the Continental Divide and we get a ton of snow, about 400 inches of snow a year. And, it melts, it comes down, permeates through the mountain, and it comes down to this kind of collection area that we call the tarn. And the water in that tarn is just absurd. It is so mineral rich, and it's first use water. It's not been drank and then and then processed and over and over again. It's first use, and so the water is just absurd. And the way it translates to spirits is mouthfeel more than anything. It just has body to it. It feels good in your mouth, and the water is just delicious. So it's an unfair advantage, and everything would taste different if we did it somewhere else. And even if you're just proofing back your spirit with this water, like vodka is 80 proof, so it means it's 40% alcohol, 60% water. So even in a bottle of vodka, the majority of what you're drinking is water. So the water is super important.
That's nuts. I was reading about some of that water that you guys are getting up there, and just the minerals and stuff that are in there, making it so good to make spirits with. What kind of challenges do you feel are up there? I mean, I have to imagine that. Like when we were talking beforehand, I was curious because if you're aging bottles there, I always hear about like in Kentucky or some other climates where that heat and the cold with the contraction of the barrels and everything lets the spirit get into the wood and out. And without that big fluctuation in Colorado, how does that affect the spirits?
Yeah, there's lots to talk about there. One thing we were talking about, the water, the mineral content of the water is so high. The best thing to do, is just to have it in its native state and proof back whatever you're making, but you can't because all the minerals will precipitate out. And so you have to do some gentle treatment on the water and get your, what we call the TDS count, total dissolved solids, to the right level. So you have to be really careful with that. And it can be tricky because, every now and then a little bit will sneak by you and it'll be a little higher than you thought. And, you'll have to keep an eye on that product because while it's perfectly awesome to drink, people don't want to see stuff floating around in their bottles. And a little bit's fine. And you should look for that because that means your whiskey's non-chill filtered. So you should see a little bit of stuff in your bottle. But no one wants to see a layer of something on the bottom. The other things are, it is so different up here. And we first started, when I learned how to distill, we worked on our mash bills and everything out in California. So we were down in sea level, Petaluma area. And then when we got up here and got everything fired up, everything was so different because of the elevation. There's less atmospheric pressure up here. So water boils at a different temperature, as everybody knows up here, but so do alcohols. And distillation, is the process by where you take a liquid and you separate it in gas form by its temperature, and then you cool it back down to make it liquid again, And so all our controls were wrong. We had to figure them out, So the temperature goes way down up here, which is nice. You use less condenser water because the water up here is so cold. And we had to figure all those things out. As far as barrel storage, that's a big deal because in the South or Kentucky, Indiana, Tennessee, they have indoor and they have outdoor ricks and barrel houses. And, a lot of them, are not temperature controlled. And they have, decent humidity down there. So it's kind of a natural fit. Up here, it's a challenge because, it's frequently gets below zero here in the winter at night. And, winter seems like it lasts 9 months of the year to me and my wife. And it's dry. Oh my God, it's so dry up here. So we do all of our aging indoors. So we have indoor facilities that are both temperature and humidity controlled. And the different locations concentrate different flavors, which is kind of cool. But those are the biggest challenges other than snow and just logistics. Getting stuff in and out is a nightmare because I-70 will get 3 foot of snow and it'll be closed days, and sometimes trucks don't make it in or out.
Yeah, I have to imagine you could run into some distribution problems trying to get it out from that altitude up there.
Yeah, yeah, big
You
time. So we warehouse as much as we can in Denver,
okay?
house there as well, and that you can get a few days ahead, and when the snow's coming in or bad weather, you can usually get ahead of it. We're getting better.
Yeah, I bet that's got to take some getting used to. Now you said that you're a Scotch fan. I like Irish whiskey.
Oh,
I've stuck to Irish whiskey and bourbons, so
there
I
you
just
go.
haven't gotten much into the Scotches yet.
Yep.
Just not quite there. But is there? I know you'd mentioned in some interviews about like getting into some more single malts or malted ideas that you guys are kind of pushing forward. Tell me about that a little bit. Is that something you guys are trying to look forward to in the future?
Yeah, for sure. So really, the first stuff we started making was malt whiskey. So Scotch is malt whiskey, which means it's made from malted barley. Um, Bourbon is made mostly from corn, so it has to be at least 50% corn. So they're different styles of whiskey for sure. So we started making malt whiskey, but I wanted to push a different take on it. I wanted to do an American style Scotch that was really focused on treatment of the malt. In Scotland, it's pretty simple. It's either really peated malt or it's not. And so the non-peated malts tend to be a whole lot of subtle flavors, which I love. And the peated malts, like the Isla style, tend to be very medicinal and iodine forward. What they don't do is they don't treat the malt like American brewers treat malt. And I thought about it like, so I'm 50. So, when I was younger, the beers, they were all like Pilsners and lagers. And that was kind of it. And now American beers are so different. The malt library that you pick from and all the hops, make these incredible beers. And so we went after a take on it like that, to where we started caramelizing the barley to get different flavors and concentrate them. So this malt whiskey that we first started making, called the Dark Arts, it's like a Ferrari monster truck of whiskeys. It's this enormous whiskey. It's $275 a bottle. It's in a really slick, sexy package, decanter style, and it's intense. It's huge, like chocolate and orange peel, and man, just really lovely, lovely malt whiskey flavors. The problem with that product is it's really not ready to release till it's about 8 years old, and when it's 10 years old is when it's hitting the sweet spot. So that's why it's kind of scarce and expensive. But we've been saving back inventory to launch a halo of products off of that, which we're just getting ready to put out. And there's one called Two Clans, which I absolutely love. It's probably my favorite thing we've ever made. So it took me 10 years to source Scotch from Scotland to bring over and blend with the Dark Arts. So this took quite a while to figure out, about really about a decade. And now we're getting ready to release it this summer or maybe late spring. It's exquisite, and the price point on it could be through the roof if we wanted it to be. But I want this to be accessible, so it's going to sit on the shelf around $60, which is a screaming deal, because I can sell it for no problem. But I wanted to do it. I wanted to do it just because I love the whiskey, and I want it to be accessible for everybody.
Yeah, that's really cool. That sounds really interesting. The idea of getting something malty like that really kicks. That sounds really fun. Is that something that, like, do you have or a lot of the creative control, or is that something that you leave to your master distiller? I have to imagine that there's going to be a lot of, walking by and sampling of things throughout the course of the day.
Yeah, man, there's a lot of sampling. A lot of sampling goes on. When we do a blend to bottle, we do them in 20-barrel increments. So we do small batch blends, and we actually taste every single barrel before it's blended. So we know exactly what we're getting before we start the blend and how we want the blend to taste. And yeah, the direction of the way the product tastes is definitely from me. But my team is just incredible. These guys are absolutely amazing. They're well trained. They have, incredible knowledge of spirits and whiskeys in particular. They have great palates. and they know what I want, so I don't have to make the blends. These guys, are incredible at what they do. But every month or two, we'll taste through the blends and do little tweaks and, plan for the future, which you have to do because you have to sort of anticipate what you're going to sell 5 years down the road, or longer. The youngest whiskey that we put in our blend is usually 4 years old or slightly older. And the blend right now has a lot of, 10 or 11-year-old whiskey in it as well. So, the whiskeys aren't super young and you got to plan ahead. That's hard to do. Then you get COVID and that changes everything. So it's crazy challenging.
Is that so when you go through that blending process, is that where, like you said, you got some 10, 11, 12-year whiskey that's in there, blending it with younger whiskeys? Are you trying to, or does the younger whiskeys help, offset a flavor profile or complement a flavor profile?
Yeah.
Is that like you were talking about with the water, not going overboard, adding water right away so that you can't, take the water out of it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think our whiskey blend is best with both. So it needs the younger whiskeys in there. What you get on the younger whiskeys is the rye spice. So we do a high rye bourbon. Our mash bill is 38% rye. And as a Scotch drinker, I want a whiskey, a bourbon that's more interesting. You can make a really simple corn whiskey that's sweet and approachable and really easy to drink. But I want more out of a whiskey. I want a lot more flavor, more of the rye spice. And so the younger barrels really help bring that spiciness on, which for me is super important because you get that on the finish, man. You get a nice long white pepper kind of finish. And for me, that makes an incredible bourbon.
So when you go to like age barrels, do you age the barrel with the intent of like this is going to be a 8, 10, whatever year barrel, versus is it something that you check along the way and then you say, okay, this is ready to roll, or do you go in there with the intent and not check it for a specific amount of time?
Yeah, it's all a combination of all the above. So we make so many products. We make about 50 products, and the majority of what we sell, about 70% of what we sell, is whiskey. So a lot of it's bourbon whiskey and malt whiskey. And we have a clear idea of products that we want to continue making through the next decade or so. And so you've got to know everything everything you're doing before you do it. You know what I mean? And the majority of what we're laying down, we know, is bourbon, and we know we're going to release some of it at 4.5 years, and some of it at we'll blend in at 8.5 to 10 years, and some of it is even older, and we hold those back for special releases, which are super fun as well.
Yeah, I haven't dove into a lot of other spirits, but scrolling through the website, the Espresso Vodka was definitely screaming at me. I was like, that looks so interesting.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's a good story too. Because I set this up to make whiskey, and that's really all I wanted to do. And then we realized with the water being so good that we needed to start messing around with vodka to see what the water did to the vodka. And oh my God, it was so freaking good. Like, okay, we're making vodka, and then from there, so then we kind of opened up shop, and we were mainly just selling bottles out of the door to people that, figured out where we were at. And we sort of had these, like, we were living these focus groups where we were just interacting with every consumer that, bought a bottle. Cause at first we weren't even in liquor stores or anything, And so I just started talking to people and getting to know their palates and what they wanted. And it became clear, that they wanted lots of things. And so we started making them. And the Espresso Vodka is interesting because a lot of people don't know this, but I think the majority, or there's a disproportionate amount of Espresso Vodka that is drunk in the mountain towns. Like the ski towns those are like the creme of the creme market share for these companies. And there were just so many people that wanted that. And so, we did it right, and it is delicious and decaffeinated too. So
Oh.
local roasters and do a Swiss water decaffeination and then make the vodka. And it's, man, it's like a nice dessert or a martini.
I bet. No, that looked awesome.
Man, I love it.
So let's talk a little bit about some of your whiskey. So the one I'm trying right now is the Bourbon.
Yep.
So can you tell me a little bit about this one here?
Yeah, absolutely. So we sell a lot of this product. It's probably our highest demand product, right? So what we do is we have a mash bill. It's 54% yellow corn and 38% rye, and the rest is barley. The barley in there is just really more for the enzymes, and so it helps you not end up with a giant polenta cake in your mash tun. So we do a 10,000 gallon mashes. They're done in 3 stages of temperature. First, hottest temperature is corn, then you cool it and add some rye, and then you cool it, and then you put the barley in. All of our grains come from Colorado farmers. We contract directly with them, so it cuts out the middleman. We do the mash, and then we cool it down to just about room temperature, and we pump it over to fermentation tanks. Those tanks are 10,000 gallons also, and they're dimpled and jacketed, which means you control the temperature. So with what's called a glycol chiller, that glycol goes in that jacketed space. It's isolated from the spirit, of course, but you control the temperature and you drive what the yeast are doing, so you get different flavors. And then after the fermentation, then we distill. Our bourbon's distilled on, it's about 40, just a little over 40 foot tall still. It's this massive still. We can make about 23 barrels of bourbon a day on that thing. And that's what that room mostly does. And then we have another distillation room where we make the rum, the malt whiskey, and we make those on our original pot still. It's a 500-gallon pot still. That one will do 1 barrel a day at most, so much smaller production volumes. And then we have an alembic still, which does the botanicals. So we make our gin and stuff on that still, and we do a American style gin, which is really super delicious. It's less piney and a little more citrus and floral. And so anyway, we do that on there. But so this whiskey, then you can get like that whiskey aged up, for several years, and that is our single barrel product. This one that we're trying here today is our blended product. So it's mostly Breckenridge, but it's nice because we blend in some other whiskeys, and I love that part of it because it just gives you more colors to paint with, like I said earlier. So we get aged whiskeys that we love from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana. And, over the years have just really loved doing that. The issue with that is, traditionally hasn't been a problem because you try all these whiskeys and you pick the ones you want, you bring them in and you blend them. That used to be a lot easier. Nowadays, with the popularity of bourbon, there's just less and less of these great whiskeys out there to get, and they become, really expensive. So I would like to keep blending whiskey, but we've been shying away from it over the years. And the whiskey we make here is just better anyway. So, so the blend has just continued to get better as the outside whiskeys have been harder to get the good ones. But man, back 10 years ago, my God, you could get these aged 10-year-old barrels of whiskeys that were so amazing, and I just love blending them. These days, it's harder.
It's funny because like when I just recently got into rye more, and I love the rye in this. I think it's awesome.
Me too. I love rye whiskey, and that's why we did the high rye.
Do you have? I saw that you have a high proof, right?
We do, yeah. So the flagship bourbon's at 86 proof, and we do a 105 proof, which sounds like it's going to be like scorching hot, but it is not, man. I'm here to tell you that is the absolute sweet spot, in my opinion, for this bourbon. We have to appeal to a broad range of consumers, so you don't want your flagship product to be intimidating, right? So 86 is the perfect spot for that. But if you really love whiskey, you've got to try the 105. It is actually smoother than the 86. It makes no sense. how that works out, but I guess it's because the mouthfeel, just the extra viscosity of the mouthfeel at the higher proof. Man, it concentrates, baker's chocolate and, different types of orange and spice. And the rye just really comes up on that one. That's my favorite proof.
And that's the same mash bill with that high rye?
Exactly the same mash bill.
Nice.
Yep.
It's weird because I don't know if it's like the fad right now that seems to be kicking, but like these super high like proof monsters that are coming out at 130, 140 proof. I mean, I feel like they're just showing off at that point.
I've definitely seen a lot of the cask strength. Those are frequently 120 to 125 ish, and that's when we're drinking or tasting through our inventory. We just drink it straight out of the barrel, so it's high proof, and it changes when you proof it back, but that's what we're used to. But the 105 is just, it's a sweet spot. And it's funny because you go up to 86, you start going up, you hit 92, and it starts getting a little hot. You're like, maybe, I don't know. And then you kick it up a little more and you're like, well, that was interesting. That changed a little bit. And as you keep going, you think it's going to get hotter, but it actually doesn't. It gets, it just gets bigger.
Yeah, I like that 105 kind of area for a lot of things that I like to drink. I think that's a good
me
spot.
too. Yeah,
some of them, I feel like you get significantly hotter than that or higher proof than that, and you're just dealing with heat, and I think you lose some flavor.
Burns.
Yeah, unless you proof it down, it just doesn't really. None of those flavors really come out. So I think that 105 would be a pretty nice spot to be in.
Yeah.
Now, what about this port cask finish? So this was the other one I got. I noticed. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's a crowd favorite for sure. So we do a lot of different barrel finishes, but that was the traditionally the most popular one. So what we do is make this perfectly good whiskey that's ready to drink, and then we put it in port casks. So these port casks come from Porto, Portugal. There's different styles of port, but tawny port is the one that marries best with our whiskey. So we fill these casks and let them age for several months. And there's, it's an incredible marriage that happens in there. So you'll notice that one's a little darker in color. It's not darker because it's older. It's darker because it's picked up some color from the port cask itself. So it's pulled that out. And then it is just, it's just got an extra gear on it, so you'll get these sultana raisins and just port notes. Port's a fortified wine, which is sweeter. The sweetness doesn't necessarily come through, but some of it does, and it just makes an even more interesting whiskey. And I've never met anybody that didn't love that whiskey. That's how good it is.
Yeah, that's really nice. It definitely gets a little of that raisin in there for sure. And I think some of the ones, the port finished bottles that are out there right now, I think they get a bit sweet at the end. I don't feel like I get that full sweetness out of this one as as other ones that I've tried out.
Yeah, and again, I think it's the rye. So you still get that nice long complex finish. So you still get the spice, and that's balanced out by the sweet. But the sweetness is really subtle on this one, and we don't, you can cheat a little bit and have what they call a really wet barrel, with a little bit of port sitting in the bottom of it. And I think if you do that, you'll get a different whiskey and it'll be sweeter. We definitely don't do that. Our barrels are sealed up and, there's still decent humidity in them, but there's not liquid in them. And so that's just, I would cheat if I had to, but it makes it better the way we do it, and we tried everything. So this is the sweet spot.
Yeah, this is really nice. And then so you've got the rum cask, and then Madeira.
Yeah, so we have a bunch of different barrel finishes. So port cask is probably a lot of people's favorite, at least traditionally. We have what we call PX cask. PX is short for Pedro Jimenez. And that is a particular varietal of grape. that is used in the Andalusia region of Spain, and that's what they make sherry out of. Particular this at least this style of sherry is more towards the sweeter style of sherry. And on that one, we get these barrels from the sherry bodegas, and those barrels are 100 to 200 years old. And so similar process, we finished it in there, and it's kind of a cousin to the port cask, but it's drier and it has more like walnut and more of the drier sherry notes for all you sherry lovers out there. We have, I don't have any right now, but a Sauterne cask. We've worked with Chateau Yquem out of the Bordeaux region of France, and done some amazing barrel finishes there. We currently have a Madeira cask finish out, which is super awesome and a great history. If you ever can look up the history of Madeira, it's like one of the most colorful wine histories ever. This grape and wine survived Napoleonic blockades back in the day in Europe, and was one of the favorites of the founders of America, which is kind of cool. So it was like drank at George Washington's inauguration and signing of the Declaration of Independence. So anyway, Madeira is like super colorful history, so that's pretty cool. And we do a double barrel, which we take this perfectly good whiskey that's ready to drink, and we put it back in a new barrel, which was terrifying to me. And then it has to age years until it's ready. But you concentrate mature oak, which is just, people love that one. But the rum cask is the newest release. And this one's a little scary because it's actually so good that I've been afraid that no one's going to want to drink any other whiskey again in their life after they try it. But it's an amazing whiskey. It took a very long time to perfect. The rum casks are our own, so we make the rum here, grain to glass in Colorado, and then we marry the whiskey in with the cask. And man, it is just it's almost too good to be true. We've had some tough critics out there in the past, and they we're not afraid, but they're all just like going crazy over this. Even like the hardest guys to please, the guys that just always have something to say. It's
gotta be negative.
They have been unable to criticize this one, and this has been picked. It just came out a little bit ago, and it's a couple people's bourbon of the year. So it's
wow.
It's that good. I'd recommend trying it. And if you can't get it, hang in there because it's allocated, but we're ramping it up.
How when you put these in these secondary casks, how long do they typically age, or does that change with the age of the barrel, or I'm sorry, with the age of the bourbon that's going into that, or is it?
Yeah, it's more about what was in the barrel before. So they're all different. Usually it's in around the 8-month range. Some things are shorter, some things are a lot longer. The Sauterne, the Chateau Yquems took a full 2 years till they were ready. The double barrel that we do, takes at least 2 years, if not longer. But most of them are under a year.
Does that double barrel or the double oak, does that give that super oakiness? I mean, after you're taking a ready to drink bourbon and putting it with the new oak?
Yeah, it does. It definitely amps up the oak. And it amps up the rye spice too. So it's a really spicy, oaky whiskey. But granted, as long as it gets to that 2-year mark, the oak, you don't taste the young, angular oak. It's mature oak, which is a coveted flavor profile. If you rushed it, it would ruin it, because the angular oak would just take over, and there's no coming back from that. Once you have that, that's all you taste. But after a few years, that then's gone. It's softened, and now you just taste the mature oak. For me personally, the double barrel seems a little bit out of harmony. And I'm a super sniffer, super taster. So for me, it's there's a lot going on there, and it's slightly out of balance. But to our consumers, it's like one of their favorites. People, I can't keep that one in stock. People love it.
It's crazy. It's fun. So is it safe to say that's not your favorite
No,
coming out
it's
of there?
not my personal favorite, but a lot of like our, hardcore whiskey fans, it's like one of their favorites, which
Wow.
is interesting because, I don't know, you think
Yeah. Now, is there any?
on that on our palates, but every
Yeah,
now
I guess.
and then you get a curveball, right? Or change.
Yeah. To each their own, I guess.
Yeah.
Is there ever a time you would see yourself going not away from the bourbon with the corn content, but going to like a straight rye?
Well, I love rye whiskey, but we only have so much capacity, and the bourbon's just so popular with the high rye mash bill that's what everybody wants. We do make rye whiskey. It is exquisite. I haven't released any of it to the general public yet. Mostly, I've been drinking it, but we will start releasing some small quantities here at the distillery.
That sounds awesome. Could you talk a little bit about the distillery? And I've got some friends of mine out in Colorado who would probably be open to going and checking it out. Yeah, tell me a little bit about, because I know you guys got a restaurant there and everything. It sounds like there's a lot going on.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. So we're in Breckenridge, kind of over towards the north edge of town. The facility's grown over the years. We started out with like 3,000 square foot, and now we're more like 12 here. So lots of production rooms. We do all the bottling here, but we have a retail shop where you enter in through the retail shop, and you can pretty much get everything we have at that shop. So things that aren't available in distribution or outside of Breckenridge. So all the flagships are here, plus the one-offs, which are some of our favorites. You can do a tasting here. You can taste like a couple items for free, or you can pay a few bucks and taste through more. Then we have some really high-end products like single barrel and the Dark Arts malt whiskey, which is like a single malt, and you can spend a little bit more and try those. And then we have a restaurant and bar here. We traditionally do what I call the tattooed version of fine dining. So it's American cuisine, elevated for sure. Our menu is written by world-renowned chef David Burke. He is two-time James Beard guy. He's sort of like the godfather to the American culinary movement, and we're friends, and so that's why we work together. And so the food's incredible, lots of spirits in the food, and then the bar is just all cocktails. It's all 100% cocktails. Our liquid chef, as we call her, is Billy Keithley. She actually just won Bar Manager of the Year from Whiskey Magazine in this really difficult competition called Icons of Whiskey. So that's a super coveted, accolade, and she got it for her work here. She only works here. So, the cocktails are insane. The food's incredible. Pairings are great. And we're getting ready to kick off a new visitor experience here. As soon as COVID is over, we're actually bringing on a new tasting room here inside the facility, a little over 1,000 square feet. And it's a little more of a seminar-like. You can sit down and do a more in-depth tasting, that's guided. You can pair that with bites, so you can try 5 different products with 5 bites from our kitchen. We have chocolate and spirits flights you can get in there, vodka caviar pairings, which are exquisite, and then a blending lab as well. So you can book a spot to blend whiskey. You can either blend bourbon whiskey, or you can blend a malt whiskey, more of the Scotch style. It's all our stuff, and it's led by a guide who talks about the history and why and how everything works. You do your own blend, and you get to bottle it, take it home with you at the end.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
off here as soon as COVID, backs off a little bit, we'll open back up.
How open are you guys right now?
So now we can do tastings. We cannot do tours, and the restaurant and bar are at 25%.
Oh.
So the restaurant's like booked out through April.
Wow.
It usually is booked out anyway because it's so good, but it is absolutely completely booked out months in advance right now.
That's awesome.
Get a reservation now. You can just get it on our website, BreckenridgeDistillery.com.
Oh, okay. Beautiful. All right, now last question for you. And I heard you talk about this somewhere else, so I gotta hear it again. But what's your go-to whiskey to pair with a cigar? And what's your
Yes.
cigar you're putting with that whiskey?
Yeah, absolutely. The by far the best whiskey pairing we have with a cigar is the PX. So the PX cask finish. So it's a Breckenridge bourbon whiskey PX finish. So that is the one that's been aged in those sherry barrels. It's crazy how well that pairs, but it's so popular that the cigar makers, it's their favorite pairing too. So we're on pretty good terms, with all those guys. My go-to cigars anymore these days, I usually smoke Drew Estate cigars. They're exceptionally good cigars, but Jonathan Drew is a good friend of mine too. So that dude has given me, like, I have a humidor with like 2,000 cigars in it. My entire life, I will never be able to smoke all those cigars. And he has a big range, but my personal favorite from him is called the KFC, Kentucky Fire Cure. So some of that tobacco is aged, and they smell kind of barnyardy, which I love in a cigar. They're medium bodied, and man, they're magic. If I'm not doing one of his, though, I'll go Cohiba, typically. But I do love cigars. It's just that I know too many people that make them, so it's
Yeah, you can get down a rabbit hole on those things for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Bryan, I really appreciate your time today. I'm looking forward to trying out some more of these bottles because these two have been really awesome so far. I really enjoyed them.
All right. Well, thanks, Tony. It's a pleasure to be on with you, man. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks again.
All right. Cheers.